And to be honest, it feels like if you're not in the SEC, you're not going to live in that top 10 anyways. It feels like the College Football Playoff Committee, bunch of old whites in a room, very subjective, a lot of opinions, a lot of loyalties, allegiances to different things, making decisions in there. And yes, we're nowhere near the College Football Playoff. There's still a lot of football to be played. A lot of teams have to battle against each other. So this is all just fodder for conversation for people like us who stand in box trucks and talking to microphones. But I have questions on how, 1 week to the next, something can just completely switch in the brains of these old whites making this decision. Last week, top 6 was Ohio State at 1, LSU at 2, Alabama at 3, Penn State 4, then Clemson and Georgia. 2 Big Ten teams in the top 4, one of them being the number 1 team in the country, Ohio State. So then we go to this week. Fast forward 1 week. Number 1, LSU. Okay, so Ohio State wins by 95 points against a team, and they drop, which makes sense, by the way, because that LSU team goes into Tuscaloosa, goes into Alabama, and puts on a show and gets a win in a place that nobody thinks about. But Joe Burrow put on a show. Joe Burrow takes the lead in the Heisman conversation. Ohio State loses Chase Young. Doesn't seem like it matters, by the way. But they win by 90 and drop a spot. LSU gets a win. Close game against Alabama, moves up a spot. All right. Doesn't really matter if you're 1 or 2.
It's probably the biggest win you can get in the regular conference play.
Agreed, but then you're saying Ohio State had no chance of remaining at 1 then after last week.
Nope.
Right? There was no chance of Ohio State remaining at 1.
They won as impressively as they could have.
And if Alabama wins, Alabama's 1 then, Ohio State drops to 2.
Right.
So Ohio State had 0 chance of remaining at number 1 for 2 weeks in a row. That's just going into that committee's meeting. They're like, listen, here's the deal. Ohio State's got no shot at being 1 next week. All right. So maybe there's no foresight. They're just judging completely on what's happening now. So Ohio State's 2. Number 3 is Clemson. Okay? Everybody knew that Clemson was going to move into the top 4. They were put at 5 last week. Everybody's like, how stupid is that? They had us giving conversation about how good Clemson is because all the conversation has been is that Clemson hasn't shown up. Clemson hasn't been able to do this. They put them at 5. They actually do a little PR tour for Clemson where everybody's like, what are you talking about? Put them in the top 4. As opposed to everybody like, well, they haven't played as good. Now it's like, what are you talking about? How are they number 5? They're the champions. Trevor Lawrence still going to be an NFL number 1 quarterback. Keep them in there. They're undefeated. What do you expect from these people? Clemson moves to 3. Then number 4 is Georgia. Okay, Georgia lost to South Carolina, had a close one against Kentucky. Now they're number 4, strictly because they're in the SEC. That is 100% the reason why they're at number 4 right there. Last week, they were at number 6. This week, they're number 4, so they're in the college football playoff. Looking right outside, looking in, Alabama at number 5. So I listened to Get Up, Ryan Clark, Maria Taylor, a lot of people were talking about it. Where Alabama just has to sit back and watch now. They don't control their own destiny. Yeah, they do. The College Football Playoff Committee literally put them in a position where all any of them have to do is just slip up just a little bit. And maybe they don't even, like if Ohio State doesn't win by 90, they're going to get bumped out of there and Alabama's going to get moved in there. Let's not act as if this isn't a subjective operation. Now, granted, Saban and them have won a national championship when they weren't in the top 4 and they didn't win their conference championship and they go in there and do what they have to do. But every game counts, they say. Okay, you just lost to LSU. Is that Ohio State's problem? Or how about Minnesota? Minnesota isn't even in the top 6.
That's the most egregious thing I've
Utah
ever seen.
is at 7. Utah is at 7. Utah is at 7. They lost to USC. USC fired their athletic director. USC is a dumpster fire right now. USC used to be awesome. I agree. USC probably has a lot of money. I agree. But Utah lost to them. Utah. Minnesota's at 8. How do the Gophers, who beat a top 4 team in the College Football Playoff Committee's eyes just last week, they're like, well, Penn State, they're our number 4 team. They're the best top 4 team in the country. Then Minnesota goes, okay, is that right? Is that right? Well, they're going to walk into our house right here in negative 17-degree weather, and we are going to absolutely put them right in the mouth. That's what Minnesota does. They're like, well, this is the biggest jump that any team that wasn't in the top 10 of the College Football Playoff Committee makes since they jumped up to number 8. It's like, well, that's just a bunch of malarkey.
It is.
Don't tell me that you respect your own opinions because you obviously don't. Last week you had Penn State at number 4. Minnesota beats them flat up, just beats them. Now they're at number 8 with no chance of getting in. If they beat Ohio State, what do you think happens? They move Ohio State and Minnesota out. You move Alabama up. You have Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and LSU.
Yeah, three SEC teams for sure.
So then the Big Ten doesn't matter. The Big 12 doesn't matter because Baylor's undefeated. They're not even in the top 10, I don't think.
No, they're like 13th.
So nothing matters except for the SEC? What the hell is going on here? What is the purpose of these guys playing? They're like, well, you put them on a neutral field. How do you think Alabama and Minnesota fare? I'm like, you know what? I think that neck-on mentality of Minnesota, I think if it's above what? If it's below 40 degrees, I think Minnesota might win by 60, to be honest.
Well, and unfortunately, we'll never find out because these horses' asses, they won't put them together so that they can play on a neutral site.
It's all such a joke. And then it goes Penn State's 9, Oklahoma's 10, Florida's 11, Auburn 12, Baylor 13, Wisconsin and Michigan. It's like, come on, dude. What are we even doing? What do we even just say it what it is? Just say it what it is. Those who have the most money, those who can travel the best in the old white's eyes in the committees ring, that's the only thing that matters.
It'd be a lot easier to stomach then if they just said it like it is.
Just said it. Just say it.
Just said it.
We're not ranking teams here. No. What we're ranking is the financial benefit of what team could potentially be in the top 4 that we can sneak in there and people would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Minnesota has done nothing wrong. All they do is win, no matter what. They have a top 4
strength of record.
So does Baylor, by the way. It's LSU, I forget who, then it's Baylor and Minnesota, top 4 strength of record. So if they're saying, well, they don't play anybody, it's like, yeah, they do. They actually have the top 4 strength of record. Well, teams, they're going to lose to somebody. Yeah, teams already lost, and you already got them in there. South Carolina, terrible at football. Georgia lost to South Carolina. Georgia almost loses to Kentucky. Kentucky lost to the University of Evansville basketball last night. I mean, come on, guys. I'm sick of it. I just think this is just one more piece of the puzzle where it's like, come on, what do we do? They have to go to the 5 conference champions and the 3 at-large bids just so that this conversation doesn't happen. What's the purpose of being in the Big 12? What's the purpose of being in the Big 10? What's the purpose of being in the Pac-12? What's the purpose of even being in the ACC as soon as Clemson's done on their run here? What is the purpose if it's just an SEC championship? Just have it be an SEC championship. I will fight until my dying day to make sure that there's a little bit more respect for the teams across the country and not just in the Southeastern Conference.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they do because for whatever reason, Iowa's still in that the ranking of like the top 25 for this. Minnesota goes on the road and beats them, another ranked team, and then what's the excuse? It's like you have 2 of the most impressive back-to-back wins of anyone out there, and if they're not in the top 4, then it's pretty clear if you're not going undefeated winning the Big Ten championship.
They got to play Wisconsin, too, at the end of the
year.
day.
Exactly.
Well, and they're going to have to play Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, they got a murderer's row coming up that they've already had, though.
Yeah.
They've had the top 4 in strength of record, and they're not in there. Baylor has the top 4 strength of record, and they're not in there. Now, granted, they got Oklahoma this weekend, so we're going to learn very quickly. Kansas State beats Oklahoma in a wild game, obviously, in Manhattan, Kansas. Baylor's looking to do the same thing down there in Waco, sick 'em Bears. But if Baylor gets the win here, does that mean anything, or does it not matter? Do none of these games matter? Does Minnesota Penn State not even matter last week? Like, what's the purpose? The College Football Playoff Committee is contradicting itself 1 week after it already said something. Penn State's number 4 team in the country. They just lost to Minnesota, who's already undefeated. They have a top 4 strength of record. Yeah, but were we right, though? Let's just get them out of there. Just get them both out of there. Come on. I mean, I'm sick of it.